Hello, everybody. Today's review is going to be of a show called The Serpent. Now, going into this show, I had no idea that this was based on a true story, like actual events that happened in the past. So that was quite the shocker from the beginning. There is like a warning where they say that this was based on like true events, sort of thing, that a lot of the names were changed to protect the people who are obviously still living, and obviously to protect the people that have passed away due to the circumstances that happened in this show. So this is following I guess, I don't really know whether he was like super famous or really well known, but I hadn't actually heard of him until now. Charles Sobra, who was I guess he was, I'm not really sure, like, I don't really think they ever explained his nationality other than he was like of Asian descent, but he was mixed race, so I'm not exactly sure like what other part he came from. I don't know if they ever really touched on that, to be completely honest. But he was posing as a French jewels salesman, so he obviously was never using his real name due to what he obviously did, um, from like the early 1970s until I think it was like 1976 when he was first caught, and then he had a serious past of escaping or being able to stay out of jail, obviously because he knew what he was doing. So it's not really. I guess it was never really known how many people he actually killed in the time that he was traveling through Asia, but kind of crazy to think that he was just killing people, stealing their passports, like their money, their identities, sort of thing, and then selling whatever goods they had to other people to make a living because I guess in a sense, he kind of believed that everybody that was like traveling and backpacking and so on and so forth was somehow better than him, and it was like a rich person's game, and then he was always trying to one up them, but he was also doing the same thing by killing them and then taking their identities and traveling across the earth. Like he was no better than the people he was saying were better than him. In fact, he was worse, obviously, because he was killing people, right? So, in order to take their identities, I don't know whether he was trying to feel like them or what exactly his like mindset was there, but yeah, it was very weird. But I did give this show a 7 out of 10, and only because there's so many dates to remember, like flash forwards and flashbacks, and so on and so forth. So, like, we start off on the 27th of November, 1975, in Bangkok, Thailand, and that's where most of the story takes place. That's where a lot of these people he brings in, and he was drugging them in order to keep them sick. And then eventually, once they got sick enough, he would take them away and kill them and then take their passports so that he could travel under their name. And I don't really know why he ever needed to do that anyway. Like, he could have just easily become a successful jewel salesman without having to necessarily kill anybody. Now, maybe I think he had already killed the person he was posing as anyway in the very beginning. And forgive me that I don't remember all the names because there were a lot of them that he used. Um, but yeah, he obviously never went by his real name, right? Um, and he would travel all around, and it almost looked like he was going to get away with it until um, the one guy from the Dutch embassy made it like national, like worldwide eventually, and then everybody was after him. So there was no way he was going to get away, no matter how far he ran, sort of thing. So yeah, and then we go back to the 1st of March of 1976 in Bangkok, and I think that was one of the first kills that we see, I do believe. And then he had traveled to Kashmir, India on the 1st of May in 1975. And then it flashes back to the 3rd of, or no, it goes forward to the 3rd of March in 1976. And then we actually go back to the 20th of November in 1973, and then flash forward to 2 years later in Paris, France. So, again, there's a lot of flash forwards and flashbacks, and it kind of just shows you like how many places he had traveled and uh, how many different places he had been and where he had committed all of these murders. So he maybe I'm thinking he would kind of showed, I guess, that he would travel under one person's name to this place and then he would travel under a different person's name back. So that was even crazier. And the fact that he was able to forge the passports was absolutely insane. I guess it would have been a little easier then compared to like now. Like a passport now, I think it would be very hard to copy. Uh, and then so this kind of goes episode by episode, right? So then we were in Chiang Mai, Thailand, on the 8th of March, 1976, and I can't remember exactly like what uh, what took place where exactly, but I know that eventually it comes across the desk of the Dutch embassy, and they kind of find it a little weird, right? Uh, did we go back to Bangkok, Thailand again too? See what I mean? Like he's traveling all over and either trying to make sales or trying to find like the next victim, sort of thing. Basically, was what he was doing when he was traveling all over, and I believe he was obviously trying probably too to find the drugs wherever he could to bring back to Bangkok in order to keep all these people sick, right? And then we go to the 23rd of December, 1975, and then we travel to Nepal. And I know that was definitely one of the places that he had committed a murder 3 months earlier. Um, so, yeah, again, most of this takes place in Bangkok, right? But he did travel and he did commit murders in Nepal. And while he was there, there was another reason he was there too, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But I know that he did obviously commit a murder in Nepal, and I think that was the one that was by the was it by the waterfall where he committed that one? I can't remember exactly. I'm trying to picture each episode, like each episode in my head, but it all becomes a blur eventually because there's so many different important dates, right? And that was mainly why I wrote these down, is because they were kind of like the dates that were like really important. So sometimes I thought maybe it would like jog my memory a little bit. But anyhow, I do know that he committed a murder in Nepal for sure, and I guess he was in Kathmandu, and I think that was actually where he was caught originally. Right, was Kathmandu, and they had him in prison for a while, and then he faked appendicitis and was able to get the organ removed and was able to be removed from prison, which is kind of crazy to even think because originally he had just stolen a large amount of cash, and I'm not exactly sure if he had committed a murder that early in the game, but I think that was when we first meet Juliet. Or no, I guess it wasn't. Because, yeah, I think it was showing actually like all of the places he had been where he had somehow committed a murder. Um, so, yeah, Kathmandu, I guess. Uh, Ver- Varanasi, India. Goa, India. Hong Kong. Like, he was all over the place. Um, and then when he got back, it was the 9th of March, 1976. Right. Because, yeah, he had traveled all over and he had committed all these murders all over the place. And then in the 9th of November 1969, right, that's when we meet the fact that, or that's when we go back in time to the fact that he had a wife named Juliet before he had, yeah, and that was when he went to prison and faked the appendicitis and so on and so forth and was able to get out, but then he was brought back in, I think, after that. And he never even saw Juliet again after that. She had decided to get a divorce from him, obviously. And he was, I guess, a little heartbroken by that, but it didn't really seem like he cared. He was always trying to seduce somebody into helping him with his game, right? So he didn't really care that much. And then we go to 7 years later in Bangkok, obviously when we're back with in real time now. And then we go to Karachi, Pakistan, and then we go back to 5 years earlier, and there was like a whole whack of stuff that happens there too. Like I can't remember everything that happens, but some of this will spark my memory anyway. And then we go to New Delhi in the next episode 4 years earlier, and then Delhi, India, 2 weeks later, and then we were in Afghanistan. So he's traveling all over the place, and then we go back to 3 years earlier in Kabul, Afghanistan, and he was just all over. Like no matter where he went, he was always trying to pull some sort of scheme, or he ended up killing somebody. Uh, so then finally, we get to the German-French border, which is where he wanted to be, so he can cross, and I guess basically be a free man. Like he can't be prosecuted there for his crimes, obviously, that he had in Bangkok. Um, but eventually he is caught even in France. Uh, but I guess the was he caught in France? Or no, I guess he wasn't actually caught in France. They fled from France, right? And then he goes from Paris to Munich to Istanbul to Tehran to Herat to Kabul to Lahore to Bombay. And then we're back in India. So now he's in India on the 28th of June 1976, where he tries to commit his biggest crime, which I don't know why. Like, you would think when you were finally on the run and finally maybe safe, that you maybe wouldn't want to draw a whole bunch of attention to yourself. So he tries to kill 30 German tourists in one go, which obviously doesn't work. He fails miserably, and then I believe it was... Yeah, anyway, eventually, I can't remember exactly why I have Delhi, India, Agra, India, and Goa, India written down. I think that was like one day later when he eventually was caught, right? And then obviously the uh, police force there thinks that they have a, kind of like a hold on him or whatever. And the girl that he's with gives herself up. And so 7 years later, eventually she finds out that she has cancer. So they send her back to Quebec so that she can die peacefully, I guess, which is kind of crazy. And after all of that time, it was just wild to me that, he still tried to, like, play with her head or whatever. Like, some of this was her fault or whatever because she gave him up, sort of thing. I was like, oh my god, dude, you were the one that brought her along on a trip, or met on a trip, and then you kind of seduced her into this, and she decided to come back from Canada to you, and then eventually it just led to this, and she wanted out, but she didn't feel like she could get out, and that's kind of unfortunate. So we'll go over the casting list now, because there's a little bit more that I want to talk about, obviously. So Tahir Rahim played Charles Sobra. Billy Howie played Herman Nippenberg, I want to say. That's how you pronounce that. Jenna Coleman played Marie Andre Leclerc, who was basically this man's kind of like Charles's main love interest throughout the whole story. Now, obviously, he had, I think it was Suda, if I'm remembering correctly, that he was also pretending that, or also trying to seduce into being with as well. And it's just crazy that all these women somehow fell for it. I guess it was mostly probably because of the jewels that he was carrying, right? And he was able to kind of like bribe them. And of course, the diamond business was, I guess, booming in Asia then. Apparently, because that was a big part of the story anyway. And he was a pretty big gambler, gambled a lot of his money away, and I think that's why he thought he had to I think maybe that was another part of the reason why he thought he always had to stay in the shadows, sort of thing. And that was why he was killing all these people to take their identities, so that he was never really able to be found, I guess. Essentially, maybe if he owed anybody money from like a game or anything, he was afraid that he was going to be tracked. But I'm not exactly sure what his end game was here. Um, and then we had Ellie Bamber as Angela Nippenberg, sorry. And so Herman was Dutch and Angela was German. And eventually the two of them, because of this, unfortunately, Herman just became so obsessed with this case that eventually him and Angela separated. I guess they were back together for a little while, but eventually they divorced, and Angela went on to work in the States of New York, and she's, I think, did it say that she retired? I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it was kind of crazy that they ended up separating, and eventually it was absolutely insane that Herman was able to finally catch this guy in 2003 and get him to admit to some of these crimes. And I guess eventually Charles just kind of rotted in jail, which is obviously where he belonged, right? Uh, and then we had Matilda Warner as Nadine Geyers, who was, oh my god, the bravest person in this entire show. She kept going back to take pictures of the apartment that all of them were in, and pictures of them so that eventually they could catch him in Bangkok, which was absolutely wild. And she kept going back, and I was like, you are putting your life at risk, girl, going back to them, because they are going to eventually find out. And of course, he was smart enough to take all the passports out of the safe, put them in the briefcase, take them to Suda, and have her keep the briefcase, and then pretend like he was in love with her, and then double cross her. And I was like, oh my god, dude, this guy's like thinking that he's one step ahead, but eventually this is all going to catch up with him. Then we had Tim McIlnery, who played Paul Simons, who was another, I think he also worked at the Dutch embassy too, right? And he was kind of helping Herman along, but he was a rough and gruff kind of like old school guy, I guess, and just said, we should just go shoot this guy and take care of it. Because if you try to go through the justice system here, you might not get anywhere with it. And, Herman was determined that he was going to be able to find a way to get this guy through legal means, I guess. Then we had Amish Edwera, I think that's how you pronounce that, who played Ajah Chowdhury. Why is that? Why is the name in the show harder to pronounce than his actual name? Anyway, he was basically Charles's right-hand man throughout the entire show, helping him with essentially all of his murders, so that I guess Charles felt like he was somehow not as guilty, which is insane, because you were killing people. I think they threw a few of them in the lake. They burned most of the bodies. That seemed to be like his main MO. And of course, back then they didn't have the same kind of technology we have now, so identifying a body that was burned that was burned that badly was impossible, I guess, or very close to impossible anyway. Then we had was it William Brand, who played Ambassador? Oh yeah, Ambassador Van Dongen, who was Herman's boss, I guess, basically, or I'm not really sure what the relationship was there, but I know that obviously he was I guess, like the higher tier in the Dutch embassy. So he was basically saying to Herman the entire time, like when this came across Herman's desk and he was a little concerned about these two Dutch travelers that hadn't been heard from in 2 months, he said to Herman, how long has it been since you've talked to your mother and she hasn't reported you missing, sort of thing. Like, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. It's not our job to do that. Leave it to the police. And of course, the police couldn't do anything about it with enough evidence, so Herman took it into his own hands until he had enough evidence. And then obviously we know that it was eventually taken worldwide, and this guy was caught. But eventually he was able to get away, and he wasn't really officially caught, I guess, until 2003, when he kind of turned himself in back in Kathmandu, which I was kind of shocked about, because you would think that when you were free, maybe he finally felt guilt for all the crimes he did. I'm not sure. Or maybe he just knew he was getting old anyway, and he didn't really care about the life that he had when he was younger anymore, and he just said, you know what, I can't keep running forever. This has finally caught up with me. I'm not really sure. It seemed like he always wanted to kind of come back around to the limelight every so often, and just let it be known that he was there to the people. Like, he kind of wanted the fame of it all, it seemed, which was weird, because he wasn't getting famous for the right reasons. He was getting famous for all the wrong reasons, but he still seemed to kind of like enjoy the fame no matter what it was coming from. And then we had, where was I? Fabian Frankel as Dominique Renolo, who was, now I can't exactly remember how he was brought in. Him and Charles met on a boat, and I believe Dominique was going to, obviously, a different location to do some sort of work. And, of course, Charles brings him in, tells him that he's sick, drugs him for a while. Eventually, Dominique says, after their pet monkey had died, Dominique said, I don't really want to keep taking this drug. And eventually he says, Charles, could I have my passport back? And of course, Charles's photo is pasted onto his passport now, and Dominique's visa has expired. So eventually, Nadine and Remy have to help Dominique get out before Charles, Aja, and Monique come back. Yeah, so it was Monique that she was going by, but her actual name was Marie. I wish I could remember what Charles was going by when he was in Bangkok, but I can't remember exactly. Anyway, obviously he was posing as the jewelry dealer, right? So anyway, she's trying to help Dominique get out. I think that was one of the most intense things ever, because he wasn't using his own passport to get out. Or did he? But I think he had the other girl's visa pasted into his passport in order to get out of the country. So he did get out. He was alive. Lived a long life, thankfully. And yeah, I think he would have ended up dead if he had have stayed any longer with Charles, obviously. And then we had Vitaly Hakim, Iker Kali, who played Vitaly Hakim, Ellie DeLong, who played Helena Decker, and Armand Rosbach, who played William Blom, who were the Dutch couple that came across Herman's desk, and that's what got him obsessed with this case. And then we had Stacey Martin as Juliette Volane. Was that it? Volane? Anyway, she was his wife. He eventually came back to Paris, obviously, with Marie. And then he was trying to, I guess, get back with her and his kid, Madhu. I'm not really sure why, after being separated from them for so long. And eventually in 2003, when he has his little interview there, she's back with him. So I was like, okay, this is kind of come full circle, which is absolutely crazy. And then we had Damon Herman as Laver, who was like another detective that worked in Bangkok, I guess, too, or some sort of businessman anyway. And he kind of gave Herman clues along the way as well, so he was kind of an important character, so that's why I wrote his name down. So I wrote the most like impactful characters, I guess, that I could remember down anyway. Then we had Ali Khan as Detective Sergeant Naranda Nath Tal, and I believe that was the one that interviewed them in 1975 or 1976 when they had been caught. And one of the younger detectives that was working there, or one of the younger policemen that was working there at the time, played by Pravish Rana, who played Thapa, actually recognized Charles when he was in Kathmandu, and when they bring him back in 2000 and was it 2003? I guess when they brought him back in. Yeah, I think actually the interview was in 1996, right? Is that correct? I do believe. Did I have that date written down? I thought I did, but I guess maybe I missed it, or did I write it in here? Oh yeah, in the 21st of July 1997 was when they had their interview with him, and then he was in Athens, Greece 6 years later, and then he went back to Kathmandu in Nepal, and he was caught, and then at that time Herman was living on the North Island in New Zealand, and oh yeah, it was the United Nations that his wife was working for, his ex-wife was working for. Sorry, just let me find the names here again. So that, so Angela was working for the United Nations, actually, in New York. So that's pretty crazy. Yeah, I forgot about those dates that I wrote in here. But yeah, it's still important to the story. So I can't believe I rambled on for 26 minutes. But yeah, there was a lot to cover in the show, and there might even be some stuff that I'm still missing that I can't exactly think of. But anyway, it was good that Marie eventually got out of there. She should have been out of there a long time ago. She should have noticed the signs when it was happening in the beginning and just said, I'm done. I don't want to be a part of this anymore, sort of thing. But I think she was in love. She was in love with the idea of the fame, but then when the fame hit and she realized what it was all about and what they had done, and the fact that she was famous for being with a killer and, an accomplice herself, because even though she may not have committed any of the murders, she was still there and still helped make all those people sick. So she was just as much to blame as obviously Charles was, right? And I think she knew that, and I think that's maybe why she stayed, because he was always somehow, able to convince her that he was going to keep her safe, even when eventually, that he wasn't going to be able to. So kind of wild. And I think she died in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, eventually the cancer ended up taking her, right? So, but I think she lived a pretty long time, even with the cancer. So that's kind of crazy. But yeah, eventually she did pass away. But it's kind of funny to see like the photos at the end of the characters and then realize that the characters that they picked in the show looked almost nothing like the real life people. But I guess that makes sense because they were trying to protect everybody in the show, even the people that had committed the crimes. So there you go. Anyway, I guess that's it for this one. 7 out of 10 if I didn't already say that, and I will see you guys in the next review. Bye-bye for now.